Good afternoon, good evening from the Heartbeat Radio Studios, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. This is Bob Johnson. We have an extremely interesting show this afternoon here on Testosterone Overload. And I'll be bringing on my co-host in a couple of minutes, Mr. Bruce Hart. And we're going to be talking to one of the greatest wrestling historians of all time, Mr. Tom Burke. We'll be bringing him on in a few minutes. We remind you, we're streaming here live on StreamYard, on YouTube, and we'll be showing you some of Tom Burke's shrine at his home, at his office in Springfield, Massachusetts. And so without any further ado, I'm going to bring in my partner in crime, Mr. Bruce Hart. Bruce got a few words to say, and then we're going to bring on, I think I'll bring on Tom and Matt, and I think Ross might be joining us too here. So I'll bring you on, Tom, and welcome to the Heartbeat with Bruce Hart.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank all our guests for joining us today, taking from their busy schedules, including Tom and Matt and my brother Ross. And I guess one of the first things I'd like to just kind of, before we get started, we got some sad news this week with the passing of wrestling legend Johnny Walker, better known to many of our modern fans as Mr. Wrestling 2. And I'm not sure if that many people from the modern generation are familiar with Johnny Walker. Back in the 70s, he was
you gotta wear the headphones, Tom.
Every bit as big a star as Daniel Bryan and one of those guys. So anyway, we're just going to do a traditional 10-bell wrestling salute to the late, great Johnny Walker. I'll do that right now. Thank you. And just before we continue, Tom, you're one of the foremost wrestling historians in the business, longtime observer. And do you have any perspectives or any stories about the legendary Mr. Wrestling 2, Johnny Walker, before we continue?
Yeah, well, thank you, Bruce. Johnny Walker, better known as Wrestling Number 2, was a guy who donned a mask and revolutionized his character. Before that, he wrestled under his own name as Johnny Walker, and he was a guy who could twist himself around. He worked for Vince Sr. When it was Capital Wrestling back in the 50s. And I was talking to Fred Curry about this earlier today, and Fred never met him. Excuse me, he did. He met him in Hawaii, but he remembers his dad wrestled Johnny Walker for Capital back in the day. That would have been probably the late 50s and everything. But Johnny Walker went on to don the mask as Mr. Wrestling 2. Not a knockoff from Wrestling Number 1, Tim Woods, but evolved into his own character. And he definitely took Atlanta by storm. He was like Sherman going back to Atlanta. And matter of fact, I have here, if my colleague could move over here, and here's a picture of Mr. Johnny Walker, Mr. Wrestle 2, at the WFIA convention that was held in Atlanta in 1974, I believe it was, 74, 75, and everything. So, and here we got a picture of Mr. Wrestling 2 again. He was very popular with the fans in Atlanta and in the mid-south area. But he definitely was a revolutionary. And I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple times. I wish I had the opportunity to, if I could turn the clock back and really sit down and talk to him and everything. It was just a cordial introduction and a little chit-chat and nothing in depth. I wish I had been. That's my reflection on Mr. Wrestling 2.
I remember, Tom, not to digress, but when I was a little kid, Johnny Walker, he used to manage the midgets, and he used to come up. I met him when I was a little kid, and he had this gimmick called Rubber Man Johnny Walker, where he was some kind of a contortionist. And he would do that, and then he would manage, I think it was like Sky Lolo and Fuzzy Cupid and Little Beaver and Irish Jackie or whatever. And that was my initial kind of memories of him. And then he seemed to kind of fade from sight in the 60s. And I heard he had retired. And then somewhere in the early 70s, Tim Woods, I think down in Atlanta or whatever, was rising to some kind of semblance of stardom in Atlanta as Mr. Wrestling. And I think shortly thereafter, I'm not sure who even the booker was down in Atlanta or whatever at that time, but next thing they had Mr. Wrestling #1 and Mr. Wrestling 2. And I remember my dad told me Johnny Walker was actually making it as a big star down in Atlanta, and it was kind of amusing because he had been sort of almost, I heard he had retired in the 60s and then kind of came back for a short while as the grappler or something like that, and sort of a nondescript mask guy. And then all of a sudden I heard he and Tim Woods were a hot tag team. And next thing you know, unfortunately, a year or two later, Tim Woods was severely injured in that plane crash with Johnny Valentine and Buddy Colt and those guys, and Bobby Shane, I think. And next thing, it was kind of like I hear the hottest face down in Atlanta, which was one of the big territories back then, is Johnny Walker. And it would be almost like somebody reconstituting Steve Lombardi now, Brooklyn Brawler or something like that. He's under a hood and he's the hottest face in AEW or something like that. So, but yeah, that was my recollections of Johnny Walker. And I met him a few years later at the NWA of conventions and some of those things, and he was always a really regular, down-to-earth guy and had a great deal of respect for some of the so-called jobbers and underneath guys. And he said he was testimony to kind of enduring and kind of overcoming all of that. And he became one of the biggest stars ever. And I heard he was like a personal favorite of Jimmy Carter's mother, Lillian Carter. And I heard some funny story. I don't know whether it was true or not. He was invited to the inauguration, and Secret Service obviously told him he wasn't allowed to wear a mask in there, and he as a consequence, I'm not going in. I don't want to, blow my cover or kill my gimmick or whatever. And testimony to his respect for the business, because nowadays that probably wouldn't even be a factor, you know. But yeah, I had nothing but great memories, and I remember I spoke to so many of the guys who were pretty legendary wrestlers themselves, like Harley and Terry Funk, and some of those guys, and they all had the utmost respect for Johnny Walker, and you know, just what a good guy he was in and out of the ring, and he did a lot of stuff I heard for little kids and all that type of thing, and he never became a mark for himself, which is maybe one of the best compliments you can pay to a wrestler. So just wind up on that note, and rest in peace, Johnny. Thanks for the memories, and congratulations on a great run.
And Bob Johnson, and I'd like to welcome Ross Hart, the brother. Hi, Ross. Sorry we got you on a little late, but thanks for coming on. I have a message here on Facebook Messenger from a good friend of ours, Terry Ellen, Magnum TA, very kind to send me a message, and I'm going to read it out to you about Mr. Wrestling 2. This is from Terry Ellen.
Magnum TA.
Magnum TA. Johnny was a friend inside and outside the ring. I had the privilege of working with him doing his first ever heel turn. He was a consummate professional and one of the best ever to wear a mask. I will miss him, but the memories we created together will live on forever. Rest in peace, my friend. Terry Ellen, Magnum TA. Thank you very much, Terry.
Thanks, Magnum. Very well put, and I'm sure that Magnum's extolling the same memories that so many of the other members of the wrestling fraternity are. You know, Johnny Walker, one of those guys that the word is often overused, but legend applies to him, and a great guy in and out of the ring. So rest in peace, Rubber Man, Mr. Wrestling 2, and thank you for the memories.
And Tom, we got several messages came in. I just got one from Harold in Mississauga, Ontario. What is the oldest item of the memorabilia that you have in your shrine? Harold, Mississauga.
The oldest item I have on display and everything, and I'll get my colleague here to pick it up and everything. Right over there on the table there, that's Zabisco versus Cutler. Yeah, that's it right there.
Can you talk about it also?
Yeah, this is of the items that I have that the oldest thing on display is this letterhead, mailing envelope from 1916 from Boston. And
that's old. Stanislaus Zabisco or Lodek?
Yeah. That is Stash.
Not Farpo.
No, not quite. No, Jack wasn't around then. So
yeah.
But that's the oldest piece of memorabilia I have that's on display. The other, I have a couple other items that are in my files that date back a few years prior to that, from like Police Gazette magazine, etc. Printouts, but that's about it.
Well, those are legendary names. I remember hearing those names: Charlie Cutler and Earl Caddock and Stanislaus and Lodek Zabisco back in the maybe around World War I days.
Yeah, exactly.
Stretch, and Frank Gotch and
Tom, I have another Facebook message just came in. This is from Bobby Valente in Queens, New York.
Yeah, I know Bobby.
And, could you ask Tom how long he's been collecting? Bobby Valente, Queens, New York.
Well, let's see. I am 73. And I've been collecting since I was 12. So you do the math, Bob.
Okay.
So it's been a few years. So
And
60 odd years.
got a couple. I know Bruce has got several questions, and I have a few, but I have a couple more quick Facebook messages before we kind of change things around here.
Sure.
I got a message here from Pierre in Victoria, British Columbia. What do you think of replica belts? That's from Pierre, Victoria.
Well, I'm going to get some heat on this subject because I have a major issue. And I see Bruce is smiling. To me, a Walmart special or a gimmick belt that's sold at shows diminishes the title of whoever the title holder is. I cannot see back in the day when we had the NWA, AWA, even the WWF title, WWA title, championship belts with fans, that 12-year-old kids, I'm talking 30-year-old men walking around with belts over their shoulders at shows. To me, it diminishes the belt, the championship, and the wrestler. That's just my opinion. I'll probably get some heat on that.
I totally agree. I remember years back when Lou Thez and Dory Funk had that iconic NWA title, and it was actually made out of real gold, and it was like holding the Grey Cup or the Stanley Cup or the, something like that. There was really sort of like, wow, this thing's got some incredible history. And nowadays the WWE belts, for all I know, they could have just dragged them out of Walmart or something like that. And, I don't even know what separates one belt from one of those crappy replica belts. And to me, it's lost a lot of its magnitude, added to the fact that they have about a dozen belts. I don't know what the hell the difference between the Intercontinental and the World and the Ultimate and the Universal and the Cruiserweight and all the other, and they all look the same. So, to me, they've desecrated the image, and as some, I can't remember who, Andre Agassi, I think, said image is everything, and they've kind of desecrated the image of the world title, which is critical because that's supposed to be the big ticket, the big thing, and used to be a lot more prestige and whatever attached to those belts. Would say Bruno Sammartino or even Bob Backlund or Pedro had those belts. They would have them for a long time, and it was a huge thing if and when they changed the title. And nowadays, it doesn't mean a damn thing to me. If they say somebody's a 20 times world champion, it means he lost the damn thing 19 times. So,
Right,
so,
exactly. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I agree with you, Tom, too, that if a belt can be just bought online or at Walmart, and if it's a replica, it really takes away from the actual title. The champions are supposed to be defending in the ring and guys are fighting for, and it's supposed to be the pinnacle of the promotion, and you can get replicas or duplicates of it in any store. And I don't think it's a necessary thing to sell kids. Kids are pretty excited wearing a belt, but there's so many other things they could sell as trademarks or souvenirs to fans anyway. They could just sell dolls or pictures or action figures, but they don't need to actually make duplicate belts, which are just cheaply made out of plastic and a little coloring, and it really takes away, I think, from the prestige of the title during a title match. But that, plus the fact that Bruce mentioned that there are way too many titles and too many belts, that they've all lost their appeal. They don't mean what they once did.
Well, I'm happy we're on the same page, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Tom, I'm going to turn this over to Bruce in a second. We've got so many people asking questions, and I know Bruce has got about at least a dozen questions. I think he might just not necessarily mention names, but I'll try to help him with this, with the names. I have, just before we turn back to Bruce, I've got a wrestling fan from Carmine from Oklahoma City. I'm not sure if that's the same Carmine we know from the Cauliflower Alley Club, but anyway, Carmine said, Tom, do you have a favorite item in your shrine?
Oh, geez, that's a good question. It changes. It actually changes. I will have something, and then I'll get something new, or something old that is new to me, which ends up becoming my current favorite item. At the present time, I would say probably the most current item that I obtained is the Ricky Starr ballet slipper, mini ballet slipper, which he tossed out to the audience.
Okay, and we're just going through. Just before I turn over to Bruce, I got one final thing here again. This is from Wayne, longtime wrestling fan, Wayne, Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome, Wayne, to the show. I think you know everybody here, Wayne, and his question is, Tom, have any wrestlers visited your office?
Yes, I've had a number of wrestlers visiting, including Ross, of course, but Brett has visited. I've had Ruth Bez, Carl Von Hess, Red Bastien, His Lordship Stephen Regal, Spanky, Tajiri, the Fabulous Moolah, Killer Kowalski, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Let's see, there are a few others that came through. Donna Crescentello with Moolah. Let's see, Brian Walsh, who was a good hand. Let me see if anybody of prominence. That's all I can think of offhand, but there have been a few and everything. J. Michael Kenyon.
J. Michael Kenyon was there?
Oh, yes. J. Michael Kenyon spent the whole day up here.
Wow.
Yeah, did Hunter, I know that you're a pretty good friend of Hunter. Did he ever get a chance to get up there?
He has a standing invitation, hasn't been here yet.
Ah.
A matter of fact, when Regal was up here, and I said to Regal, I said, of all the guys in the WWE, who would enjoy this the most? And he, without hesitation, he said Triple H. So that's kind of neat.
And listen, Tom, I'm going to turn that. That sounds fantastic, and I'm going to turn. Bruce has got a few questions. There's the first question. We have another caller, Bobby from Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Yeah.
I'll let you go, Bruce.
Bob Branson from Winnipeg wanted me to ask you how you would compare Vince McMahon Sr. and Vince McMahon Jr. as one who's been around both of them and kind of on the wrestling scene in New York for 50 years or whatever. How would you compare Sr. and Jr.?
The Senior was a total gentleman, old school. Vince, I've met Vince several times, cordial, polite, but a shrewd businessman and everything. And I think he's like out to grasp the world as much as he possibly can. Either wrestling, and of course he had the football thing, remember the bodybuilding deal he had and everything. The old man concentrated on wrestling, and he also promoted boxing. but those were the two venues of sports that he engaged in. Of course, his father, Jess, was involved in boxing and wrestling with Tex Rickard. But I think that Vince the Younger, who is in my age range, as much as the business has changed because of him, he had the foresight, I believe, in 82, 83, 84, to realize there was a major transition happening in the world of communications with cable. And the local regional promotions basically being run by older gentlemen who were old wrestlers did not have that concept and thought things would just stay the same. Well, things did not stay the same, that's for sure. I remember the conversation I had with between Killer Kowalski and Captain Lou Albano in a hotel, and Lou said to Walter, "We're giving him 6 months and he'll be done." Well, that 6 months ended up years and years, decades. So it didn't go, you know. So they thought that Vince was going to fail and that they would take over, but it didn't happen. But you have to give the man credit. What he did to revolutionize wrestling was he went out and he solicited people outside the wrestling business to form his corporation. Media people, communication people, people in marketing, which was something totally novel in wrestling. And he did it, and look what happened.
I've got a question here from Alex in Orlando, Florida. Tom, he just said, could you name the things that Vince McMahon Jr. has done in regards to wrestling that you highly endorse or approve of, and the things that you disapprove of or dead set against? So it's a bit of a long-winded question.
Yeah, it's a kind of a complex question. I'll be straight up to answer. I don't watch the current product, so I don't know. And I hate the word product. To be a product is a cantaloupe. I don't go. I don't watch Raw. I don't watch SmackDown. So I don't even know what's going on. So I cannot say anything about that. However, he has taken wrestling from smoke-filled arenas that he claims were only drawing minor crowds, which really wasn't true, and has escalated it into a form of entertainment. Of course, wrestling was always entertainment, but he has taken it that one step further, where it became a national showpiece. And in one sense, that's good. In another sense, it isn't, because when he took over and dissolved all the local wrestling promotions, how many guys got unemployed? There were only a set number of wrestlers that were targeted to work for WWF at the time. And of course, the Kansas City office, the Amarillo office, the Tampa office, they were all eventually closed down. And those guys used to wrestle 7 nights a week. So, you know, and then the local connection between the local wrestling scene and the fans was there when it was under a local promotion. Then it got homogenized to such a point that it didn't make any sense to me. You know, I mean, you know, you go to a show now, you don't even know who's on the show. You might know the couple of the main events or the main stars, and that's it. Also appearing, and there's no development of a storyline, a feud, or something with the other cards.
Yeah, I think perhaps the most egregious thing Vince did was just kind of do away with or eliminate the so-called territories. I think if he had endeavored to work with, there were some incredible promotions out there back in the 70s and 80s, like my dad's and Don Owens and Amarillo and Florida and all like that. And that was where all the talent was coming from. They were turning out an incredible group of wrestlers and sustaining the fan base worldwide. And I still don't, I think that's, impacted the business tremendously. And not to be putting down the modern day wrestlers, but there's very few that are, in my estimation, really great workers, or certainly not in the same league as the Funks and the Harley Races and the Billy Robinsons and all like that. And
I concur, absolutely.
I think, if Major League Baseball at some point, maybe say George Steinbrenner, if he had endeavored to become a megalomaniacal whatever, which I think he tried to do, but, he certainly, if he had done away with all the other competition and all, I can only imagine where Major League Baseball would be if they had done away with the minor leagues and the farm systems and all of that, and I think wrestling's paying the price, and even more importantly, the fans are suffering because of it. I don't want to digress or get into a long-winded tangent on all that, but I know back in the day, wrestling fans out here in Western Canada were able to come out every week, 52 weeks a year, and see some incredible wrestling, and it was the same everywhere else. Nowadays, WWE comes up here maybe once every year or every 18 months, and it's, for want of a better term, a limp dick kind of waltz through, there's little or no sustained action, and they don't even endeavor to set the table to get you to come back the next time. And so I think all of that has eroded the grassroots, or, the bedrock of our business. And as a consequence, I think the business is in a lot more kind of a tenuous state than it should be, and I don't like to be kind of pessimistic, but I have serious doubts about the future of our business, all things considered. Anybody that tries to convince me that the brand of wrestling that they have today, whether it's WWE or AEW or whatever, is better than something back in the 70s or 80s, I would tell them again, for want of a better term, to get their head out of their ass.
I agree with you there. And what it is to the younger guys today, those guys that are breaking into business on the indie circuit and in their 20s and everything, they never saw how wrestling was back in the day with a Billy Robinson or a Nick Bockwinkel, or a classic match with guys like that. That art form, or that, I don't use like the word art form, that technique, it has got dried up.
I remember back in the day, Tom, we used to have these long road trips, do 2,000 miles a week traveling around, and a lot of the other territories were like that. But that was an incredible learning experience. That's where all kinds of transfer of knowledge and experience. You have the old veterans, the Harleys and the Archie the Stompers and the guys like that. And they would have these young up-and-coming rookies like Dynamite Kid and my brother Owen and my brother Brett. And they would school them on those road trips. And that was a huge part of the transfer of knowledge from one generation to the other. And that's missing, or it's non-existent today. And I think it comes out in the wash because, as I said before, the brand of wrestling and the caliber of most of the new wrestlers is not even close to what it was back in the 70s and 80s. And I'm not sure if circumstances will ever change. I doubt it. So you could maybe endeavor to restore some of that. I have serious doubts that that's ever going to happen.
Yeah,
And,
it's
Tom,
very doubtful.
we have a Sheldon from Boston. He said that he really wants to thank you for all those great photos that everything that Matt's taken care of, and he wanted to ask you about. He saw a lot of WCW stuff in there, and Sheldon wanted to ask you if you had any opinion on the demise of the WCW. That's Sheldon, Boston, Massachusetts.
I think we all know Sheldon. Hello, Shelly. How are you? In regards to WCW and its demise, I believe that when WCW first started, it was going to really do something, and that I think it was going to shake Vince up. But with total mismanagement from the top, and then the entourage of office help by the boys, realizing they're just going to sift off the off of the bank, and that's what they did. And it's a shame it didn't last. Of course, it was just a disaster what happened at WCW, but it was evidently the way it was going to go because of mismanagement, So it's too bad, but I think they could have had a good thing going. But sad to say, it didn't work.
And I've actually got a dual question here. Another Facebook messenger. This is from two people who live in Denver, Bob and Diane. And this is for Tom. You have a great collection, and they've been commentating here about all the wonderful pictures you have about the wrestlers from the past. Could you ask them again, Bob and Diane? Would you ask Tom why some of these very big names were never included in the WWE Hall of Fame? And that's from Bob and Diane from Denver, Colorado.
Well, that's a good question, and I want to thank those two people from the Mile High City. This is again my opinion. I don't know how much stock is there in there, but let's just use someone from the past. I was a very, very good wrestler. Died too young, sad to say. And my friend Ross carries his middle name, Luther Lindsay.
Yeah.
He was a fantastic wrestler. Luther has had the greatest respect for him. And he's a guy who would have been, maybe the times were different. He could have been shot right to the top. But because of the geographic political scene at the time and socialization at the time, he was held down. But in his wrestling, where he wrestled counterparts of the white race, he was absolutely fantastic. And he's a guy that should be considered into the Hall of Fame. When he would be accepted into the WWE Hall of Fame, I think Vince would look at it and say, well, where's the exposure he had in our organization or parent organization? I think that's what they look at. I believe that they basically cater to those who had some affiliation with WWE, WWF, WWF, or Capital Wrestling. If you weren't part of that entourage, I don't think they consider anyone into their Hall of Fame as a candidate. I may be wrong on that, but I think that's just my point of view.
Okay, listen, I actually got another Len, Edmonton, Alberta. Len Phillips from Edmonton, Alberta. And he's got the same question for Ross and possibly Bruce, if you'd like to talk about that, Bruce. Wrestlers from the past. A lot of them haven't got into the WWE Hall of Fame. Any comments on that?
What's that?
It insults everyone's intelligence to exclude, say, Luthez, Whipper Watson, Jimmy Londos, Frank Gotch, Strangler Lewis, people like that, who are the equivalent of Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio and Ty Cobb and all like that. And then you put some, some of these nondescript entertainers, no offense, Liberace or whoever, and then you take a lot of these jabronis that were marginal at best, no offense, Brooklyn Brawler and some of these other nondescripts that are in the WWE Hall of Fame, and even some of the modern guys, just because of personal vendettas and stuff. Like, I don't think Dynamite Kid, who's one of the greatest wrestlers ever, is not in the, and was a WWE champion. He's not in the damn Hall of Fame. So, some of those things, desecrate the perceptible legitimacy or make you disinclined to take the whole thing seriously when it's all cronyism. If you had Cooperstown like that and somebody had a grudge against Joe DiMaggio or that Babe Ruth was a womanizer or, that Ty Cobb was a racist or something, and they excluded them from the Baseball Hall of Fame. How the hell would you take that seriously when Ty Cobb's got a 367 lifetime batting average or Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs or whatever, So I think they have to put aside a lot of that petty crap and, render it legitimate or, as my old friend Ron Starr used to say, do away with the sanctimonious bullshit.
Good point.
Tom, I had a question for you. How many of the promoters from the Northeast did you know on a first name basis, like Abe Ford or Phil Zacco or?
Oh, well, Abe Ford was very good. I knew him well. Bo Curry and his son Fred. And of course, the two sons that are wrestlers, Rocket and of course Nick Killer Kowalski, Gypsy Joe Gonzalez, who was a Santos boy. When I was growing up, when I started getting into wrestling at the age of 13, 14, by the time I reached late 14, 15, there was no Major League Wrestling per se in my area. Paul Bowser had died. Eddie Quinn, who was attempted to take over the promotion on his own,
right?
He had a lot of issues going on with the federal government as to his involvement in boxing, which had an association with family members, and I'm not talking family members of the Fuller family, but I'm talking about family members of that have ties to shall we say, concrete blocks and rivers. So, but anyways, he gave up wrestling in Boston and was only a showpiece in Montreal, and then passed away, I think, in 67 or 68. And Tony Santos, who had been promoting since the early 50s, was the only guy around here in my area that was promoting. We had wrestling during the summer every Wednesday night at Mountain Park in Holyoke. When the summer would end, he would transfer his wrestling shows to the Springfield Boys Club or the Holyoke Boys Club, whichever venue was available. And that's what I grew up on, with no TV. And he ended up having 400, 600 people at a show, And as a matter of fact, Matt is tuning in right now into Golden Boys of Free. That's June 23rd, 1965. this poster and everything. Go to way to bring against Bruno Sammartino, who was Pancho Valdez and everything. But I got to know all those guys, a lot of those guys. Maurice Chevier, who became Chris Cote, and I were very good friends. And that's another issue. He was the first one who started using face paint before face paint was popular. And he was an outstanding star. He had some demons, which sad to say took him away from us. But we were the same age. We used to be pen pals. We were kids. That's another thing. Nobody, there was a whole slew of us. Back to the Santos promotion, Harley Race worked for him as a great Mortimer. Terry Garvin, Ronnie Garvin, all went through the Boston promotion. Luke Graham was another one. So it was a launching pad for many great groups. Les Thatcher's another one who started with Santos. So Les Thatcher's another wrestler that visited here, and he was a house guest for it twice.
Could you tell me, Tom, if Toots Mondt is in the WWE Hall of Fame? Or
I don't know if he is or not. He should be.
It's almost egregious if he's not.
Yeah.
He's like one of the founding fathers of
absolutely
that whole promotion. He Bond,
him and Willie Gilsenberg and
Junior, all of that. And I've often wondered. I would have figured he would have been a shoo-in, but I don't recall ever hearing his name. And I know my dad used to speak very highly of him and say that he was, integral part of the whole East Coast wrestling scene back in the 30s. And one of the really major players.
Yeah, even in the 60s, and he moved to Pittsburgh and was the Pittsburgh promoter out there. And then eventually he moved to St. Louis where he retired. And I forgot who it is. Somebody knew his widow and was invited over to the house, and he got a chance to look at the scrapbooks. I would love to take a look at those scrapbooks. Does that answer your question, Ross?
It sure does. Yeah. Tom, what's the rarest piece in your collection that was maybe unusual or very hard to find, but most unusual piece? Is it a belt or a trophy or?
I'll tell you what. And this has a connection with you again, Ross.
Okay.
The loving cup there, if you would, sir. I have here, my colleague will. I have here a loving cup from Tony Santos to your godfather, Ross, Jack Pfeffer.
Wow, yeah.
Wow.
And I got this through eBay. A guy was selling this who lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wow.
And I asked him, I said, how did you acquire it? He said he acquired it in an estate sale. And I said, whose estate? He said, I can't remember. And that might be about, probably almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
So that's probably one of the most unusual items I have.
I remember when I was a kid, Tom, Tony Santos used to send us programs from Boston or whatever, and they always had all these wrestlers with the bullshit names like Gene Karnitsky and Killer Kanalski or something like that, and
Sam Martino.
They kind of went out of their way just to piss off the NWA or whatever. But I was always intrigued, and I'm not sure if you recall any of that stuff. But
absolutely, I grew up on that stuff. I think that has always been in my realm of interest with wrestling. For the independents, because that's what I grew up on. When I was a kid, when we had wrestling on TV in 58, 59, and early 60s, and then it diminished. Santos was the only ball game in town. All my friends, we don't care anymore. You know, myself and one other guy, Richie Hennessy, were the only two guys that we continued to watch it through high school. But that was it. You know, and here I am. I'm still doing it. Ha ha ha. Yeah. So that's it.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and listen,
I'd like to see added to the current Hall of Fames in wrestling. There's one in Texas now, and another one's going to be starting up in upstate New York. But what items or souvenirs do you think those exhibits are missing, or that would add to their displays and attract more young animal fans?
Well, I don't know. You and I both been to both the Amsterdam one when it was upstate New York and also Wichita Falls, Texas. And I will say this about Wichita Falls, Texas. The facility they have is awesome. It's big. There's a lot more room for displays.
Right.
Whereas the New York facility was kind of consolidated just because of space. However, with the with the Texas hall, and I had mentioned this. I think I mentioned to you, Ross, and I know I mentioned it to George Shires when we were there. The displays should be more in a chronological order, and because everything's like spread out. I realize it's a one-man show with Johnny Mantel, as it was a one-man show with Tony Villano in New York State. As for the New York situation, they had to cancel their events because of the virus this year.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll pick up something next year. Can we have two Hall of Fames? I don't know. I'd like to see both of them work together. And not have conflicting dates for different affairs that they may be having, But we'll have to see what happens.
I agree with you, Tom. I would like to see more chronological collections for certain years or time periods, and then breaking it down into different territories.
Exactly.
Or federations, everything from Japan to Germany and Austria to the UK, the rest of Europe, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Puerto Rico. I don't know how many of those archives are still available, but I think that's what would really be appealing if they categorize it by promotions or territories and chronologically.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Ross.
Yeah,
I think there's a wealth of memorabilia, a wealth of history, but it's got to be reorganized in a chronological fashion.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's mine when you mention these guys.
listen, Tom, I've got another I got a question here from a guy up in a place called Equalic. I think that's how you pronounce it, in the Northwest Territories of Canada.
Wow.
Ross from Equalit said, Tom, he's really been enjoying all these great photos, and he's got to see your museum one of these days. He said he's talked to Ross Hart and me and a few others in person, and he said he met you one time at the Cauliflower Alley Club. But he said, Tom, what do you envision of the territories now, and your advice to any independent promoter? That's from Ross, Equalit, Northwest Territories.
Well, first of all, there's no territories per se. My advice to anybody getting into wrestling on a promotional level: hope you have a good sized bank account, because you'll need it, especially now because of all the additional restrictions that are going to be coming on and everything. The local wrestling promotions here in our area, we're getting 150, 200 people and everything. And I think that's standard for a lot of places and everything. And then, of course, when you have, shall I say, promotions that have, and I'm going to use this term, I'm going to get heat on this, backyarders that come into wrestling that think that, you know, I'm a superstar. Well, we have, I don't have it in my files. Wrestling today, outside of Vince's group, AEW, and the offices in Japan, the wrestling groups today are semi-pro wrestlers.
Yeah,
They're not wrestling 5 days a week, 6 days a week, paying their mortgage from their payoffs. They're working once, twice a month for beer money. That's my opinion. I'll get heat on that.
I've got another question here. This is from Jamie in Waterloo, Iowa. And Jamie wanted to know if you've ever been to the Waterloo, Iowa Dan Gable Museum.
I have not been to the one in Waterloo. I attended the inductions and when it was in Newton, Iowa, but not the one in Waterloo. I hope to attend the one in Waterloo at some point in time.
Yeah.
And I've got another question here, Facebook Messenger. This is a young guy, friend of ours, Chris from Johnson City, Tennessee. He said that he has seen several of your posts on. We have a friend here coming on.
Oh,
Hey.
We have it's from Chris in Johnson City, Tennessee. He said, Tom, you've had several auctions on your Facebook site, and when are you going to have the next auction? And how can he get hold of? Oh, get him off the thing, or we're going to lose the screen. Hi, Spot.
Okay, my next auction is scheduled for Sunday, tomorrow, June 14th, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's on my Facebook page, and as long as you're a friend on my Facebook page, you can bid on it, and it's right through Facebook.
That's
So
great.
check it out.
Okay, that sounds great. And we have so many. We're going to try to get all these questions answered in a few minutes. We have when we end our show, we have well, we'll get to that in a few minutes. I got a guy here, John, Jon, from Hazleton, Pennsylvania. He said he'd like to ask Ross and Tom and Bruce, in their opinion, who are the 5 top faces of all time and the top 5 heels of all time. John, Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
That's a pretty broad question, but some of the very best heels that I ever recall were, oddly enough, some of them were probably not even that well known in the States, but Archie Goldie, the Stomper, was incredible in my estimation. Abdullah was one of the hottest heels I ever recall. Another guy who was primarily a baby face in WWE, but was one of the best heels I ever recall, was a Dynamite Kid. Another incredible heel was Terry Funk. You know, and Killer Kowalski was one of the very best. I was pretty young when he was up here, but he had incredible, very believable, sinister heat, you know, and those are some of the very foremost heels. I heard Buddy Rogers was another one who was remarkable, you know, very methodical and had almost kind of a mesmerizing effect on the fans. And my dad told me a few of the old heels back in the day that were really incredible were like Strangler Lewis was primarily a heel, and Bull Curry, he told me, was also quite good. And I used to hear about some of those guys down in Texas, you know, the hard-boiled Haggertys and the some of those guys that Fritz von Erich was pushing down there. So those are some of the best heels I've ever heard of, or some of the ones I was fortunate enough to see in person. And they all seem to have an exceptional innate ability to get heat, and not only do that, but most of them were very adept at making the faces look better than they often had any business looking like. So those are some of the best heels that I recall. I'm sure Ross has got a few that he might want to throw out there.
Yeah, ones that come to mind, maybe Joe Kowalski, Aldo von Erich. You know, they were true to form, and you know, they stayed in character, right? But they were smart. You didn't see them fighting with fans outside the ring. They did all their work in the ring. You know, they got incredible heat, but when the time came, they made the baby faces look great. They sold. They flew for baby faces. They were great talkers as well. You know, it was all about their performance in the ring, their presentation, their persona, and they were all so good at that and consistent as well. So, but for top baby faces, it's hard to say. You know, you look at San Martino and Dory Funk, two classic world champions. Bob Backlund, the great All-American. This was before the period of Hulkamania, but you can't deny Hulk's appeal. Was he a great performer, technician? No, but he was a great showman. He had good psychology, and he got over. But he had some incredible heels and guys to work with as well. So I guess you're as good as the guy that you're wrestling sometimes as well. So yeah, but those ones come to mind for me.
Well, that's
There was a number of other baby faces that I thought were really incredible. I always thought Billy Robinson was exceptional certainly when he first came up here, and in his own way, a lot of people say that he was a little bit kind of lacking in he was not that spectacular, but in his own way, I thought Bruno wasn't bad, and for the purpose he served back in the late 70s, early 80s, I thought Backlund was pretty good, I remember some of those other baby faces that we had. Another guy who was really exceptional, underrated, was Leo Burke, a very good, one of the best Japanese faces I ever recall was Fujinami. He was an exceptional ring technician and seemed to do everything well and had a kind of a certain cachet about him. And a few of the English guys that I saw also over in England that were really exceptional. Some of those Johnny Saint and Jimmy Breaks, and some of them were probably not familiar with a lot of the North American fans, but incredible. Les Thornton was another one who's he had that innate ability, to sell incredibly well and get sympathy and come back with fire, which is sort of the hallmark of all the really great baby faces. So those are some of the ones that I've heard of. I used to hear Argentina Rocca's name. My dad said he didn't do that much, but he kind of had that ability to come back with the fire and take the crowd with him, which is a huge part of getting over as a baby face. And I think one of the modern day guys that it's a couple that really come to mind is Daniel Bryan. He didn't do that much, but he had that yes, 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 and got over incredibly well. And I think to some degree when he was a face, Seth Rollins was in that, regard. And really got over, and there was a couple of others that were really like that. My brother Owen, I thought, was way better worker as a baby face or whatever than he was ever really allowed to show in WWE. He was, I'm sure Ross would attest to that. I never ever thought he ever hit his stride in WWE. Had him doing the blue blazer and all that other nonsense and the nugget and all that. And I always thought it was kind of a waste of his talent because he was an incredible wrestler as well.
Yeah, absolutely. He was
I
a player, and he was, he included the fans and everything he did. He was a much better performer than as a heel, which to me was a role he carried on pretty successfully in the program with Brett, but they underutilized him as well. And I think Owen was not going through the motions, but he certainly put out and worked a lot harder as a baby face, and had more incentive to as well, than as a heel where he was just sort of sneaky and underhanded. But
I know two others.
A good performer, will be one that can make that transition from heel to baby face, and there's not too many that really did it successfully, but you look at Terry and Dory Funk, and they could go back and forth, and a few like that, and then they're pretty multifaceted. They could work a heel or baby face, but they seem to be exceptional.
There was two others that I omitted, but one of which was a baby face was Luther Lindsay, one of the very best. My dad said incredible ring tactician and everything, and really had an understanding of selling and coming back with fire. And the other guy that was really incredible, and I don't hear his name mentioned that often today, he had incredible charisma and all of that, was Sweet Daddy Siki. Both black guys, and neither of whom were ever really afforded a chance in some of the bigger promotions, for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they were among the two best workers I've ever seen. I was pretty young when they were up here, but
definitely two of the best.
Incredible, very good. But what are some of your favorites, Tom, or guys that you
okay on the heels? I'll go with in no specific order: Kowalski, Bull Curry, the Sheik. When the Sheik was when I first saw the Sheik in the 50s and early 60s, not the Sheik in his 2-3 minute matches. Those guys, two brothers who I really enjoyed as heels were the Gallaghers, and I remember them on TV, and they had this maneuver where they would take their thumbs, put it on the temple of their opponent, and the guy would go blind, and he'd be walking around like that in the ring. Of course, it was so believable back then, But they got so much heat for that. It was just unbelievable, And going back, Donnelly Jonathan was a heel. He was good too. As for baby faces, well, we met. I concur with you, Bruno Sammartino, most definitely. On the local scene here, the top babyface for Tony Santos was Craig Scarpa, Manny Cortez, Ed Carpentier was another one, and let's see who else. Oh, this Cowboy Bob Ellis, and one more. I'll throw in one more name as a top babyface. That I personally liked and everything. What was Argentina Zuma? And because he was a Santos guy, I guess maybe that's a connection. But I'm a little prejudiced there, I guess. But those are my picks.
Not to digress, Tom, did you ever see the infamous Dr. Jerry Graham?
Oh, yes, I have. I could share stories about Dr. Jerry.
He worked Calgary a bit, but he was way past his prime. But I was told by my dad and others that in his heyday back in the 50s with, I think it was Miguel Perez and Argentina Rocca, and not sure if he was teaming with Eddie Graham, but my dad told me he had incredible heat and was extremely good on the mic, and whatever he did seemed to get over. But do you have any memories or whatever of Dr. Terry?
Oh, I have quite a number of memories of Dr. Jerry. In his later career, I never met him when he was wrestling in his heyday, because that was Capital and they weren't running up here. Except I would see him wrestle on TV on a snowy Thursday night from Waterbury, Connecticut, or Bridgeport. Well, anyways, Dr. Jerry. I had met Dr. Jerry, and we became friends. And my dad passes away. Dr. Jerry found out. He calls me up and says, "Tom, I'm in New York. I'm coming up for the funeral." And I said to myself, "My God, that's all I need. Dr. Jerry at my dad's funeral." Thank God he didn't make it. But that was a worry, But no, Doc was all right with me. He definitely was a character. He had a lot of problems, but he definitely was a character,
Yeah.
He went to CAC a number of times and everything. Last time I saw him was at CAC. I did an interview with him at CAC, but he was a good guy, in my opinion.
I totally agree, Tom, that all these guys saw fit to adopt his name, like Wayne Coleman, Billy Graham, Superstar, and Luke Graham, and Eddie Graham too. So I guess that says something about him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Matter of fact, his kids try to break into business too, but never. Oh, I got another story about Dr. Jerry. I got a phone call from his son, and he asked me how we could get in contact with his dad because he lost contact with him. And I said, "Gee, I'm sorry to tell you, but your dad passed away about 2-3 years ago." It was a sad situation there, family wise.
Yeah.
But that was Doc's lifestyle. What's up next, Bob?
Okay, I've got so many questions here. Do you have a photo of Anne Laverne in your collection?
No, I don't. Unless it's probably the only thing I would have would be something in a magazine, but no photos of her.
She was married to Roberto Pico, wasn't she?
Right,
the old
I believe so.
Mexican wrestler, and her daughter Marie Laverne was pretty good babyface lady wrestler back in the 70s, and I thought her grandson or something was an MMA star. Steve.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, I think Gordon Nelson was his father, and he was married to Marie Laverne. He was kind of an old shooter. He started with Stu back here in the 50s, I guess. But
I was going to say, Tom, speaking about Marie, actually, I've got Marie on Facebook, and maybe in a future show from the Shrine, we could have Marie come on the show.
Sounds wonderful.
I'm trying to connect with her right now on Facebook, but
we can.
Super nice lady. I remember her back in the '70s up here with, I think, maybe with the touring lady wrestlers. Do you remember her, Ross?
Yeah, Marie. Yeah, she was here with Betty Nicola, I think, in 1971 during the
Very
Stamp.
good wrestler and
Yeah.
nice looking girl too. Very well regarded. My dad had high regard for her.
Yeah, beautiful girl.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, we seem to be not up against the clock exactly, but Tom, we would love to have you come back on a future show, and you and Matt, and do this some more, because we just kind of touched.
We only touched the tip of the iceberg.
But what we generally do when we end our show, we're going to end the show with a couple of things today. I have a few. One, it's sort of a group question from some of our viewers, and then we'll end having the 10-bell salute to the Rubber Man Johnny Walker at the end of the show. But first of all, I'd like to thank Ross for coming on. Ross, thank you very much. Thanks for coming on, and Bruce and Tom, and of course our camera guy Matt James. That was a really interesting way to do the show, and we're gonna. Now I've got so many people here sent me Facebook. I've got all kinds of Facebook comments here about they've been reading all your posts on Facebook. Do you accept any more friend requests, Tom?
I still have time. I still have space for friend requests. Yes.
Okay. So you know how to get hold of Tom and
Tom Burke on Facebook.
On Facebook. Now, to end our show, we kind of do something kind of in a general way, and I'm going to just one moment. I've got all these things just keep coming in. Okay.
This is for Tom.
This is for Tom, exclusively Tom.
From the fans.
These are from various fans around the world, including a guy from Jason Hilton from Sydney, Australia, Mark Billington from the UK, and David Lowe from Dundee, Scotland, and Johnny from Wichita Falls, Texas, and many other of our great fans around the world. In one short sentence, give us a description in a one word or one sentence. I'm going to name them off, and you just tell me in one sentence. First of all, Vern Gagne.
Shooter.
Okay. Again, one sentence or one word. Eddie Graham.
Wise man.
Okay. The great Killer Kowalski.
Friend.
Okay. Harley Race.
Handsome Harley Race. One of the best.
Best. Terry Funk.
I booked him for Ottawa once.
Okay. What about the great Bruno Sammartino?
A gentleman.
And also, and this is one of the names on the list here, and we like here at the Heartbeat like to also send our best wishes to Dom DiNucci, who is in the hospital. Dom DiNucci, Tom, tell us about
Dominic
him.
DiNucci. He was my understanding is that he was released yesterday. He had I think a valve situation, blockage. A true gentleman. He was always friendly, always good, and to me, he has the walk, the presentation of a wrestler, babyface out of the ring, you know. And in the ring, he was very good. He was a big star in Australia.
Yeah,
he was very good, very good.
Excellent. And just got a few more here. The great Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan.
I know the name. I want he was he transitioned the sport in character, you know, from those days of the cauliflower ears to this. Thank you.
Okay. And one of your very good friends, a close friend of yours, Hunter, Triple H, Hunter Hearst.
I first saw him when he was wrestling for Kowalski as Terra Rising, and he did rise to heights beyond his wildest dreams when he went into the wrestling business. A good man, a good hand.
Okay, got Mr. Wrestling 2. We talked about him, but quick sentence about him again.
Compelling, in the sense that he was a person who came into the business, worked his way up, a journeyman, just a regular ham and boner, and then made it a stardom. That was when wrestling was wrestling.
Sounds good. And final name here on the list, Lou Thez.
My champion.
Great. And anyway, Tom, we want to thank you very much again for coming on.
Oh, it was a pleasure, guys.
And
Thanks,
just
Tom.
before,
Thank you, Tom. It was a pleasure to have.
Yeah, and Ross, I'm sorry you can't come this year.
Yeah. Well,
Voice of reason.
I know you'll add a few
Yeah.
souvenirs and nostalgic items for next year.
Yeah.
So keep checking them.
It's nice to have an intelligent perspective for a change. So thank you.
and
Oh,
Tom,
my
again,
pleasure.
we've had thousands of views and calls here on Facebook Live, and Messenger and tweets came through, and they said, "Can you please get Mr. Burke back on the Heartbeat over the summer? We'd like to talk to you and see some more stuff. Would you
We'll
come
work on
back?"
a schedule. We'll work on a schedule with my technical guy.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you guys can just hold on for just a second. Again, Bob Johnson, we've had this great show this evening right here on YouTube via StreamYard. And we hope you enjoyed the show this evening. Just going to let you guys know about some of the upcoming shows in the next few weeks. Next week, we have the associate producer of The Wrestler and one of the producers of 350 Days, one of the greatest wrestling movies ever made. Mr. Evan Ginsberg will be joining us next Sunday.
You're an old friend of his, aren't you, Tom?
Oh, I know Evan for years. Yeah, good guy.
Yeah. Feel free to call in. We'd love to have two good friends with enlightened perspectives on there. It would be great. Maybe we can come up with some new perspectives, but that would be great, and appreciate it if you do come on.
Yeah.
And then on the following week, on Sunday, we will have, this man is a true legend, one of the a very good friend of mine, and Bruce and Ross, and yours, I know, Mr. J.J. Dillon. He'll be joining us.
Yeah, another intelligent voice of reason and very well respected within the industry.
And then at later in the month, actually the beginning of July, we'll be having the great Abdullah the Butcher and the guest with him. So Abdullah the Butcher will be joining us.
Yeah,
With a fork or without?
yeah.
So we'll have him on. I think
Very well loved and respected by the Hart family for sure.
And then we have another guest coming on right after that. Bruce and I just finished reading a really great book, and I think Ross may have read that book, the original Black Panther, the life story of the black wrestler, Mr. Jim Mitchell. And John Cosper wrote that, and John, of course, wrote the Dr. D book and several other great publications. So he'll be joining us. And then we have a special guest in the 12th of July. The Joe Laurinaitis, better known to wrestling fans as Road Warrior Animal. He'll be joining us live right here on the Heartbeat with Bruce Hart. So
yeah, he's got some fascinating perspectives and a legitimate legend, very well respected and hasn't been on that much. So anybody who hasn't had the chance to listen to him should tune in because, he's a legitimate legend and has some very interesting perspectives about the wrestling past and present.
okay, well, that's we have a lot more people booked, but we'll give you those for the next month. Or great fans on YouTube, and I understand soon we will be on Facebook Live with this double podcast. Not podcast. What this I guess is a podcast. But anyway, Tom, again, one more time, we want to thank Mr. Tom Burke, and again, great assistance by Matthew James. Thank you, Matthew.
And I'd like to thank my brother Ross for coming on. Very much appreciated his intelligent perspectives. And Ross is the unsung hero of the Hart family. He was the producer and the behind-the-scenes strength and the voice of reason and Stampede Wrestling, the TV show, and the promotion, and everything else. And he doesn't get nearly enough credit for all the things he did. So I'd like to just reiterate my gratitude here and now.
Great working with you and learning from you.
Thank you.
So we're going to end the show, fans around the planet. This will be a 10-bell salute to the recent passing of one of the greats. I had a chance to meet this gentleman down at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Amsterdam, New York. The late, great Johnny Walker, Mr. Wrestling 2. We'll finish with the 10-bell salute. Thank you for listening this evening to us. And Bruce, all yours, the 10-bell salute.
To Mr. Wrestling 2, thanks for the memories. And, I hope you're enjoying sharing the memories with some of the fellow legends up there. And thank you very much, Mr. Wrestling 2. And this is a tribute to you. Thank you. 10-bell salute.
Sayonara.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, take care, Russ.